Starting things a little different today. I'm geared up because I'm excited about a really good sport. Dave Sartoni is going to be with us again today here on SUP Connect Live because it didn't record last time. It also was at an unusual time. Today we're at the usual time, but on a different day. So we're going to get it recorded, but hopefully a lot of you can join us who didn't get to join us last time. We're going to talk about whitewater stand-up paddleboarding. So gear is definitely one of the things we're going to talk about, but I'm going to get roasting if I wear this the whole time. So thank you for joining us today. This is a weekly interview that I have the honor of doing for SUP Connect. And gosh, it was supposed to be just a short pandemic thing, but the pandemic has been long. But I have thoroughly enjoyed almost 2 years of doing interviews. So hopefully we're telling your followers, okay, yep, you told them. They're here. I see that Dave is here. I'm going to find him and have him join us. Dave is from Reno, has an amazing background. Hasn't done whitewater his whole life, but has done a lot of really interesting things. But right now is just as an instructor, tour guide, doing tons of stuff. Apology, I found you. And hopefully you can join us, Dave. And we're gonna, there he is. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us again. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can, and hopefully we will have no internet difficulties. The love-hate with technology, huh?
It's great when it works.
Well, maybe things are back to normal for me. I actually got on the water for the first time in over a month, so I'm feeling fantastic. I hope you are too, although I'm hoping I'm not keeping you from the water. I know it's the weekend. But you shared so much great stuff, and your travels are amazing, things you've done, things you're going to be doing this year. So much good information about just being on the river and how different it is. So, but let's go first to where you found stand-up paddling and kind of your water background.
So I found stand-up paddleboarding on Lake Tahoe. I started out, as many people do, on a lake. My wife sort of tricked me into trying it out. Growing up, I was not a water person at all. So I was like, great, another water sport that I'm not gonna like. But you know, she tricked me into trying it, and it was love at first stroke, so to speak. Once we stood on the boards that we were borrowing and we're gliding over the clear waters of the lake, I remember looking over at her and telling her, we're going out. We're gonna go buy boards tomorrow, and we did. So that was in 2013. Yeah, and we haven't looked back since.
That must have made her very happy after you probably complained about, okay, I'll try it.
You bet, yeah. And,
yeah, well, Tahoe is an incredible place to start, so that was a great choice. But what was it about stand-up? You said that first stroke that you realized, ooh, I like this. This is different.
Yeah, so at the time, rock climbing and skiing were my obsessions. And so I was, used to a balance sport that required gliding over frozen water. And there was just something about standing on a board that just connected me with my skiing background, both downhill skiing and cross-country skiing. And I was dabbling to cross-country ski races, and I was like, this could be a really good activity that I can do during the skiing off season to sort of stay in shape, because there's a lot of similar body movements between cross-country skiing and stand-up paddleboarding. So yeah.
I've never lived in the snow, but I was just talking to someone about that he's going to try cross-country ski racing because it is that same stroke movement, and he's up in the Midwest. So very interesting. Now, Tahoe was the first. You're from Reno, which is close by for those, because we get people on this from all over the world. Lake Tahoe, up high, Reno just on the other side. Actually, it's the closest big city, or is Sacramento? I don't know. Kind of equal distance.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you are on the lake. North Lake Tahoe from Reno, it's about 45 minutes. and South Lake Tahoe, Sacramento, probably a little longer than that. So Reno is the closest city, although we're in Nevada for part of the lake is in Nevada and part of the lake is in California. So there's a border that goes right across the lake.
Yeah. Well, there's that whole theory of blue mind, that water, has this healing power and everything. I've never heard if, but hey, frozen water is water, right?
It
But
is.
being outside on snow and in snow and playing in snow, things I bet is actually has all of those physical and mental kind of benefits also.
Oh
So
yeah,
you're known,
there's a magic for sure to being on snow and playing on snow. Absolutely.
you're known as the SUP River Guy. Is that who named you? You name yourself? It's very explanatory.
Yeah, so we were just coming up with like catchy names for the business, and we thought that was a good way of figuring out what we did, and we also thought that it maybe has a little bit of humor to it. So yeah, we just went with it, and yeah, we stuck with it, and I think it explains pretty well what we do.
Well, you started on flat water. You already had good balance. So some people have a little bit of a learning curve, but as we know, if you have the right equipment, it can be the right place. And stand-up paddling is so expansive, but you found your niche pretty early. So what brought you to the water? How'd you get, excuse me, the river? How'd you get on the river? And
Yeah, so Jeannie and I were looking for different ways of challenging ourselves on boards, and we were like, "Well, I wonder if we can, you know, go on a camping trip on our boards, right?" So we put a bunch of gear on it, find a place to go, paddle to it, camp, and then do it again the next day. And initially, we were mainly used to lakes, and there's a lot of beautiful lakes in California, so we were looking at lakes that maybe have islands that we can paddle to and do that, or maybe, like circumnavigating Lake Tahoe and camping along the way. And then I started coming across these websites online that had blogs about folks that were stand-up paddleboarding on rivers that people go down with canoes, so really mellow rivers. And we found the river in Utah, the Green River, that goes through Moab. And sections of the Green River are actually sections that people go rafting on, but this particular section is relatively mellow and goes
Mhm.
to Labyrinth Canyon in Canyonlands National Park. Beautiful stretch of river. So we're like, oh man, this sounds great. And as a climber, I knew the desert really well. I'd been to Moab a bunch of times on climbing trips, and so we embarked on this adventure, renting inflatable boards, not knowing what we were getting into, but really excited about the challenge, and set off for this 4-day trip. And the feeling of being on moving water on stand-up paddle boards was just exhilarating. And so throughout that trip, I kept thinking about, well, if we can do this, I wonder what else we can do on SUPs in terms of rapids, right? And so that sort of led us to open or walk through that next door, which was figuring out how to run rapids on our SUPs.
So cool. So it's amazing to me. I mean, you and your wife are obviously super adventurous, that one of the first things you would do on a river is to go on a self-supported camping trip where you're bringing your gear on borrowed inflatables and not having been on inflatables before. Very impressive. Maybe we'll even jump because I got a tip that you have an amazing story and history, and obviously just the rock climbing and all is part in the snow is part of it. But what's your background? It sounds like you've had quite the adventurous life.
Well, I came over to the States from Europe. I grew up in Italy when I was a freshman in high school, and then after a year of college, I was in Florida at the time. I joined the U.S. Marines and did 8 years in the Marines. And for my second half of my enlistment, I was stationed at the Mountain Warfare Training Center. It's this really small base in the middle of the Sierra Nevada that helps train Marines that are going to go off and fight in mountainous environments.
Wow.
And when I was there, I learned all of the different mountain skills, including climbing and skiing, and that's how I got into it. And when I left the military, I got a job as a mountain guide here in the area. So I would take people out on the learning slopes of Donner Pass and teach them and guide them through their first steps of climbing. Or I would take folks multi-pitch climbing at Lover's Leap in Strawberry, California, Mount Whitney, Mount Shasta, backcountry ski guiding in the wintertime, teaching avalanche safety courses and so forth. So that was my obsession and a passion before I found the river.
Incredible. So much knowledge you gained through that. And thank you for your service. And
You
that's
bet.
so cool. So I'm guessing maybe that hooked you on California, living there. I mean, Bridgeport's a little bit remote. It's north of Mammoth. But all of those places, I think people recognize Mount Whitney and of course, Yosemite and other places, even if they don't know California well. But Reno and Tahoe area, have you been kind of in this area since then?
Yeah, so I came here from actually from Hawaii in 2001 and in the military, and I fell in love with the Tahoe area, and Reno seemed like a great place to base ourselves from. My wife's a teacher, so there's lots of teaching opportunities in Reno, and the airport is really accessible. So if you're traveling places, it's a great place to be, and we're close to a lot of really cool spots if you like the outdoors.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. So I first saw your name, the River SUP Guy, as an instructor, and just was obsessed with all the pictures I saw of different rivers there. Kind of explain what you have in Reno and the Tahoe area and where you guys paddle and where you teach your whitewater classes.
Sure. So a lot of our rivers in the area are fed by snowmelt. So most of our paddling happens in the springtime. We have a river that runs right through town called the Truckee River, which has two whitewater parks. So I'm often there even when the water is low and it's cold out, like today, and just to hone and practice my skills. Great for surfing as well, river surfing. And then other places nearby, as we step into California, have rivers that have flows controlled by dams. And so the South Fork of the American River is where I teach my classes. And that river has recreational release from the dam year round. And in the wintertime, it might be 1 or 2 days a week. In the summertime, it might be every day, right? So it changes based on the time of year. And if we have a good snow year, we're going to have more water days. If we have a drier snow year, then we have less water days. But because of our mild winters, there's opportunities to river paddle here year round.
Yeah, that's amazing too. Like, of course, you want the snowpack for the extended season and, depending what kind of water you're looking for, but water. But how fun that you're able to do that right now. So you were out this morning in Reno and you're
I wasn't out this morning. I was out yesterday. I was actually out in Auburn, California, just down the street from Sacramento, and we were paddling on the North Fork of the American River. Really cool run. The water is actually quite a good level right now, so we were out enjoying the waves out there yesterday, and some good surfing too. So there's a park sort of like in the middle of nowhere on the river where they were going to build a dam several years ago, and that project was stopped. So instead, they built a whitewater park there. So there's a great place for river surfing if you're into that.
Oh, cool. And that I told you, I mean, our moving water, being a ocean person and knowing the coastal water, is surfing also, and there's definitely crossover there. But the downwinder is popular too. But I think moving water is a big attraction. But you have a very different kind of moving water, and we talked a lot about that last time. And I want to get back into the gear is different, how you ride the board is different. So I don't know what you want to start with. Maybe equipment. You saw I was silly today, and I started with equipment on.
Well, I think you came prepared, right? So just like you showed at the intro, right? 2 items that are mandatory when you're paddling in whitewater are a vest style PFD and a helmet, like you modeled for us.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see those, kayakers wear those, rafters wear those, canoeists wear those. So they're pretty much considered mandatory whenever you're in whitewater. And the reason for the vest style PFD, right, is you want to make sure that you have instant flotation whenever you fall in the water, right? You don't want to have to figure out how to inflate your flotation device, like we have those waist style types of PFDs when we're paddling maybe in flat water or in the ocean, right? So the vest style is mandatory. Another item that I think is probably misunderstood from folks that come from a flat water ocean background is the leash. And so, you know, on the river, we have a hazard of having a leash potentially wrapping around some type of obstruction while we're in the water, right? So if our leash is connected to our ankle, right, then that's going to be a hazard, right? Because it's going to be pretty hard to sort of like bend in current and be able to release that leash around the ankle. Same with if it's around the knee, pretty hard to get to it. So just like you showed, we want a leash specifically designed for the river with a quick release system that can be reached from either hand, right? And that should be connected either on our PFD or at our waist. You know, the one you showed can connect to the PFD. You can also pair it with a belt, right? That has a quick release system on it as well, and that's going to go around your waist. So a couple of different options for how we can connect those PFDs, those leashes to us.
But leashes that's one of the most important topics, I think, just because, as we've talked about, in the US, the rule is personal flotation device, and they don't talk about leashes, but many of us think leashes in many different situations are probably the most important piece of safety equipment, but it's very mixed in the whole whitewater world. But what type of leash is what's the crucial part, I think, in that whole quick release system, and where you have it was really new to me until we had a death here in a tidal lagoon where someone got stuck and could not reach their ankle because they were being pulled underwater, where if they had a quick release at their waist, their arm could have reached it. But when it's at the knee or the ankle, like it is for surfing, it was a situation where she couldn't self-rescue. So leashes are very important. And I know there's some whitewater people don't wear leashes at all. And that's particular conditions? I mean, I can't imagine not wearing one, but I'm not an expert.
I would say it's a risk assessment that every paddler has to make before they get on the water, right? I would say making absolute statements that, you know, you always have to wear a leash or you should never wear a leash. I try to stray away from that. And so I personally look at it more like on a spectrum, right? So maybe you're getting ready to go out on a river and it's early spring and there's really high water conditions, cold water. There's few areas on the side of the river where you can safely access the shoreline because the water is now flowing through trees, barbed wire fences, whatever the case is, right? So staying in the middle of the river is going to be your best option. So in those conditions, if you fall in and you get separated from your board, now you're going to have a really cold swim. And there's a chance that you might not be able to access an area on the shore that's safe for you to exit the water, right? So in those situations, I would say having a leash would be a really good idea, right? Other end of the spectrum, maybe now you're like in the fall and you're looking at low water conditions. Maybe you're on a river that's more like a creek. So there's like some technical, challenging drops. Maybe there's like snags or trees that are in the water. There's not a lot of pushy current. So maybe there's pools below your drops so that if you fall and get separated from your board, the board is not going to run away from you and pretty easily you can get back to it, right? So in those situations, the hazard might be getting the leash wrapped around something that could lead to a problem. So in those situations, you may choose not to wear a leash, right?
Yeah.
But regardless, I would say that if the only leash you have is an ankle leash, right, and you don't have a quick release way of connecting it to you, I would say it's safer typically to go with no leash.
Yeah. Some of us have done some makeshift things. This is not for whitewater, but just for instance in racing where we use our ankle leash around our waist PFD because it's easier to get to, especially if you're coming in maybe on a wave and need to run up the beach and want to disconnect from your board easily. So again, it's for a different reason, but wanting to have that quicker release and have it within arm's distance. So we talked a little bit about that. I do really think, as wonderful as equipment is that has come from the kayak canoe side and the surf side, I think we still have some tweaking to do to really make it specific to stand-up paddling in the but I think the most important thing you said was that it just depends, and you really need to understand conditions, know what you're going into, different parts in the world, different weather, different seasons, different type of water, all super important.
Yeah, I paddle. I go to Europe and paddle a lot, especially in summers. And there's a group of river stand-up paddleboarders that I paddle with from Czech Republic, and they're probably some of the best stand-up paddleboarders, river stand-up paddleboarders in the world. And their whole mindset about river paddling is training for slalom races. If you've ever watched the summer Olympics, you've probably seen canoeists and kayakers going through a slalom course. Well, they have competitions like that for stand-up paddleboarders. And one of the things that happens when you're on a stand-up paddleboard and you try to go through one of those courses is the leash ends up touching the gate. And if the leash touches the gate, or any part of your body or equipment touches the gate, you get a 2-second penalty. So those folks always paddle without a leash because that's their mindset, right? They're training for slalom racing, right? So no leashes. Also, the rivers in Europe, most of them tend to be a lot of lower volume rivers. So again, the chances of getting that long separation from a board is less likely. So that part of the world, very strong mindset about not using leashes.
Very interesting, but yeah, different reasons in different places. Had never heard that about gates. I think I told you, participate in this one big river event that they had up in Idaho called the Payette River Games. And I was a beginner, and we had some lessons, but it was a really interesting mix of people from kayak background doing the stand-up part, but who had much more competence in going around gates, understanding eddies, doing the drop and staying on their board. But there was right before the finish line, there was a break and the river went 2 directions. And I always thought, if I don't have a leash, I'm going to go one way and my board's going to go the other way. But it was such an interesting learning curve, and just fascinating for those two kind of cultures to come together, because we had some really competitive SUP people and really competitive kayak people really battling it out. So fun stuff. And one of the things, as you've mentioned already, that was brand new to me, that there are water parks, that there are places in cities and in rivers where they man-made construction. You mentioned a dam turned into a water park where they have it set up. And that's a lot of the river surfing, I think, sometimes happens at those, but that they have courses that are set up for whitewater paddling, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it teaches you that there's more than paddling on a river than just going down river as fast as you can, which is really fun. But personally, I find, for me, the funnest thing on a river is crossing eddy lines. You know, we talked about current and how, you know, the hydrology on a river is different than the hydrology that you might be used to if you're an ocean paddler, right? So on the river, we have current that's moving downhill. And anytime the current flows around some type of obstruction, it creates an eddy on the downriver side of that obstruction. And an eddy line is the separation between the downriver current and the eddy current. And it's probably one of the more tricky and turbulent spots that we can cross on a stand-up paddleboard. But if you do it right, it feels amazing, right? It's sort of like the feel that you get when you're carving on a set of skis or on a snowboard. Or when you're doing like a bottom turn on a surfboard, right? So getting good at crossing eddy lines feels really, really good. And the whitewater parks give you an opportunity to do that, right? To hone your skills, to learn how to move across current. And for the ones that are designed with the opportunity to ride surf or surf waves, river waves, it's really cool, because it's a wave that never ends, right? As long as you have the stamina, and provided that there isn't somebody waiting in line, right, you can ride that wave as long as you like. And some people are pushing their limits on that, and they've come up with some pretty cool tricks that you can do on riverboards.
Yeah, it was amazing. Let's see, I've watched in Boise, Idaho, and in Bend, Oregon has one
Hmm.
too that had a chance to. And then I've seen the one in Reno, but seeing some people doing really amazing things. So it's kind of fun for the whole, surfers don't think of going inland, but I don't think they realize there's this other type of surfing. And if you are someone who likes to push the limits and learn something new, a whole new direction to go is the surfing.
Absolutely.
So we got through, I think, most of the equipment. There are rocks in rivers, man-made or otherwise. So helmet definitely. I threw in this one too, just because this is something I had never seen or heard of. Not required for everyone to carry, but you were saying you, as instructor, carry this.
Yeah, I carry a throw rope, and mine is on a belt, sort of like the same belt that you have on your pool type of PFD, right? Goes around my waist. There's a quick release on it, and there's two reasons why I have that on me. One is for safety in case I have to use the rope to assist somebody. The other reason is the PFDs, the vest PFDs that we're using are designed for kayakers, and they're pretty high up on the torso, which means as a stand-up paddleboarder, your lower back is exposed in the event of a fall backwards in shallow water. So I like to wear my throw rope in the area that pads that lumbar spine. So it provides some cushioning on there. And it's come in handy on a couple of occasions with giving me a little bit of extra padding back there.
Yeah, that's really smart. And that's again to the equipment thing that I had never thought about that a sit down person needs it at a different level. It's interesting, like this shirt I have on is really short and it's made to go over a regular kayak buoyant PFD. But if we made it for stand-up paddling, it probably would be smarter to protect some of the areas standing that aren't covered when you're sitting, when you need to
You
put the
got it.
skirt on. Very interesting. So my friend, one other thing that I don't have because my daughter loaned it to roller skate is we actually, the first time I did this with my friend Terry Plunkett, we were at Outdoor Retailer, I think they did it on a river in Utah, and there was a company there that made elbow pads and knee pads. And when learning, I found those very valuable, and it made me feel, I don't know, better, more comfortable in whitewater. Probably not needed everywhere. Do you ever use anything like that?
Yeah, so padding is great. Sometimes the wetsuit, if you're in an area where the water is cold enough to wear a wetsuit, can provide some padding.
Mm-hmm.
But I look to padding that's made for mountain biking, and that's what I usually look at as a good option for wearing on the river. Something that provides protection but also allows mobility, right? Is what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And they make hip pads, shorts. They make t-shirts with padding on it, and then the elbow pads, the knee pads. So they have all sorts of different padding wear that you can get based on the type of river that you're paddling. And some people are lucky enough to paddle in rivers that are really deep with a lot of water. In those cases, maybe the padding is not needed. But if I were to go out and paddle on the Truckee River today, pretty low water right now, I definitely want to get some padding. And at a minimum, I like to wear knee pads because I find that the knees are the part of my body that tends to find the rocks more than anything else. And it's also one of the parts of the leg that takes a little bit longer to repair in case you do something funny to it. So knee pads are a good idea
Yeah.
for sure.
Interestingly, kind of off subject a bit, but we had actually eddies and interesting turbulent water the last 2 days because I don't know if you heard on the coast, tsunami warning. Actually, everything was closed yesterday, but it was opened up and there was still leftover. There were just these wild swirls going on and eddy lines. And people who are used to our flat harbor, yes, we have tides, but the tidal current's very slow, very mellow. And wow, it's really crazy. Even today, the leftovers, and then seeing some videos of that current pulling out. But I bet your river skills, was my point, would have helped. You could have explained to
Absolutely.
us. But mainly, we were avoiding the swirling stuff to not fall in.
Yeah, I've been on some big water river in Mexico where when you're going through an eddy line, there's actually multiple of those swirling areas that are one after the other, and they're spinning in different directions. So you're trying to figure out the way that the water is moving between the different whirlpools, right? So that you can ride current that's moving in the same direction that you want to go in, and not accidentally get sucked into one of them. But yeah, it's pretty fun, to interact with the currents on the river for sure.
Yeah. Well, isn't that one of the beauties of Mother Nature and enjoying all types of water, is that it's always changing and unpredictable.
Absolutely,
And so it's not
absolutely.
boring. It's not the same every time. Even our flat water paddles, we have variety. So you teach up, usually you said just in California, on the California side most of the time. What would, let's give some tips for someone who is going to come to your class. For one, how do you prepare? And then maybe someone who's going to try to learn whitewater on their own or go for the first time.
Yeah, so good question. I would say one of the, in terms of preparing for a whitewater class, one of the biggest differences in the boards is the fact that the boards on the river that we use on the river tend to be shorter, wider, and they typically have shorter fins, which means they don't tend to track in a straight line. So you have to make up for that with really smart, effective use of your paddle stroke. And so we often rely on the long, narrow boards with long fins to help us go in the direction that we want to in flat water. So one of the things you can do is take your fin off when you go paddle on the lake or in the ocean, and start working on paddling just on one side and adjusting your paddle stroke in a way that allows the board to track straight. I find that for most flat water stand-up paddleboarders, their first day on the river, one of the hardest things to learn is how to make the board go where they want it to go, right? So good tip is paddle without a fin, right? And start working on your forward stroke. And try paddling just on one side, right? And make the
Yeah.
board go where you want it to go.
So do you call that a bow draw stroke, or it's not the only one, but is that?
Yeah, the bow draw is a great one. You can also add in there a canted forward stroke, right? So turning or inclining your blade so it's more of a 45-degree angle to the rail of the board instead of being at a 90-degree angle to the rail of the board. So both of those are going to be really helpful with that. The other big one that I often see, because the board is so much wider, is paddlers' inability to keep the shaft of the paddle vertical, right? So the more vertical the paddle is, the more straight your board is going to go, right? The more horizontal or angled that paddle is, the more your board is going to turn. So again, working on the paddle stroke is going to be a big one. And then I would say the other one is the idea of rail pressure. Kayakers will refer to this as edging, right? Because kayaks have edges, right? Inflatable SUPs don't have edges, they have rails. So the idea of instead of having 50-50 pressure on the right and left foot, right, which puts 50-50 pressure on the rails of your SUP, is the idea of starting to shift that pressure, right? So now one foot, one rail may have 80% of your weight or pressure, while the other one only has 20%, right? That's another concept as a flat water supper that's not very practiced, right? Because most of the time we're riding with even pressure on both feet and both rails. And on the river, anytime we're crossing current, we have to switch that pressure. And the timing of it is important, but just getting the feel for it, right? And having the ability to maintain pressure through the paddle stroke. Because what I often find is somebody paddles and they're going through the different phases of the paddle stroke, is that they'll change the pressure on the rails, right? So the idea is you want to maintain the pressure distribution that's needed throughout the paddle stroke. So the ability to separate or isolate between what the upper body is doing and what the lower body is doing is important. So those would be the two tips, right, to think about before taking a class.
Yeah, great stuff. And those are some really good tips of things people can do before they even get on the whitewater that anybody can do. And we see that a lot with beginners. They only think of their paddle for forward momentum, and for paddling, for pushing, the forward stroke. But there are so many other things the paddle is good for, and you've mentioned a lot of them. And for the river, you need a lot of those. So playing on the board and moving your feet, which again, a lot of people just are in that stance. I do remember that's really interesting what you talked about, like the even weight, separating top and bottom can be useful in a lot of types of paddling, but is essential on the river. I know as a surfer, I think it was my surfing skills that had me wading the wrong direction when we tried to do that Eddy, crossing the oncoming water, 11 o'clock, but then I felt like I usually had this, my body wanted to lean the wrong way. Is that true? Have you found that before?
Yeah, it's common. It's common for people who have a misunderstanding of the direction that they need to lean. And what I try to explain to folks is you want to understand the direction the water is moving towards. And you want to make sure that you always present the bottom of the board to the water, right? So you want the water to flow under your board. So you want to raise the rail so that the water can flow under your board. If the rail goes down and the water hits that rail, the river is going to tell you right away that you were pressuring the wrong side. You don't need me out there to tell you. You don't need somebody to, take a video of you. The river is going to have
The
instant
river is going to
feedback.
tell you. I love that. Well, I brought this out last time because my friend John Hadley said there was a story about a yellow bag, and you already mentioned Mexico, but you have done some amazing trips. You've taken people, you've done your own, and you have some planned for this year. So let's talk travel in Mexico a bit, and the yellow bag story. Remind me who
Sure.
that was.
So I'll preface with the fact that Bill Mashek, the owner of the Yellow Bag, was our trip leader for that trip. And he organized this amazing adventure in southern Mexico and the Chiapas region on this amazing river named the Usumacinta River, the Sacred Monkey River. And it runs at the border between southern Mexico and Guatemala. So it's a part of Mexico that over the years I've seen some action and was inaccessible to paddlers. But in recent times, the trips have started again. So we were lucky enough to go out there pre-pandemic and jump on a trip on the Usu. And I describe it to people that it's like being in an Indiana Jones movie, right? But you're on a river. There's Mayan cities that are only accessible either by the river or by long treks through the jungle that are inhabited by howler monkeys and other exotic wildlife. There are areas where we still wanted to have armed guards with us in the event that we did encounter some trouble. So for a few days, we had folks, local folks, on a little motorboat with rifles that were following us along for protection. There are crocodiles in the river, so it was a pretty exciting adventure. And Bill's possession were inside this yellow bag, and he seemed to get separated from this yellow bag everywhere he went. So I even remember on this one occasion there was these local kids that, as we were about to get on the van to take us back to Palenque, that ran out with Bill's yellow bag and telling him that he had forgotten that by the river. So,
Well, I didn't get a yellow bag because of the yellow bag story, and I hope to keep better tabs on my yellow bag. Sorry, Bill, but happy to have a matching bag. So Mexico, that trip just sounds amazing, and it's so cool to put adventure together. I mean, your whole background sounds like Indiana Jones. I was thinking 007, but yeah, I mean, it feels like it's led up to this, but the water side of things presents, like you said, this access to places that could only be through this huge jungle hike, but instead you followed the river in and were able to get to Mayan ruins. That's just crazy. I believe you've done another trip down that direction, Costa Rica.
yeah, I was just in Costa Rica. We got back a couple of weeks ago, and we partner with Amazing Vacation Costa Rica to run this trip, and usually very river centric. On this particular one, we also added a few days of SUP surfing on the Pacific side. So we customized those trips for all types of paddlers, but particularly for stand-up paddleboarders. And we tend to run that trip at the end of their wet season, beginning of the dry season, so November, December timeframe. And one of the things I love about Costa Rica is the wildlife. They're a small country, maybe the size of the the state of Maine, but they have 5% of the world's biodiversity. And I'm a kind
Wow.
of a sucker for wildlife. I love interacting with the local animals and learning about them. And it's a pretty special experience. You know, you're on a river. There's like iguanas, you know, crawling out on the branches of the trees. There's monkeys howling at you. You know, there's cool fish floating around in the river. There's exotic birds around. So it's kind of I like to find trips that have something besides just paddling, and Costa Rica provides a really cool place to interact with the culture and interact with the life with the wildlife while also enjoying some pretty special and amazing rivers.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, those both sound um, great, but you talked about the ones you have fingers crossed that everything goes well, both in the US and outside the US coming up. So you are originally from Europe, and the trip you have planned, not to Italy, but to a neighboring country, sounds amazing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Socha River is a very famous river in Europe. It's in the small Slovenian country of Slovenia, and goes right through the town of Bovec. It used to be the border between Italy and the Austrian Empire, so it's an area that has seen a lot of action in terms of warfare over the course of the years. People there speak so many different languages because they've been part of different countries, and now they have their own country, and they're a very proud nation, and very committed to protecting their resources. And really cool natural wonders is one of their big resources, and the river there is pretty special. It's a low volume river with the most beautiful water that you've ever seen. You can actually drink the water right out of the river. And it flows through these white limestone formations, and it creates really cool technical rapids that you can run on a stand-up paddleboard if you have, you know, intermediate to advanced skills. Yeah, just a beautiful area, this alpine valley with this magical river that runs through it. And it's been the site of quite a few different movies, just because, you know, you feel like you're in a fairy tale when you're paddling on it. So pretty excited. That trip's happening in June.
Yeah.
Yeah, very excited, and fingers crossed that we'll be able to get out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then back home here, you do one. It won't be the first year. I think you were able to pull it off last year in the pandemic, even on the
So we
salmon.
didn't we didn't do it in 2022. We did it in 2020 and 20. Sorry, we didn't do it in 2021. We did it in 2020 and 2019. And it's on the main Salmon River in Idaho, through the Frank Church Wilderness, which is the biggest, most remote wilderness area in the lower 48. Called the River of No Return because back in the day, the homesteaders would use their wooden boats that they take down the river to build their homesteads. So you didn't come back from it, right? Because you found an area that you can homestead. Beautiful river going through these granite canyons, amazing sandy beaches, relatively deep, SUP friendly rapids, suitable for folks of all different levels of ability. We'll do 80 miles in 6 days with raft support. So it's fully catered, amazing food, amazing guides, and you get to paddle when you feel up for it, or you can ride in the raft if you want to take a break and relax. So it's just a great way to experience a river, is when you can do it for multiple days in that setting, in such a beautiful spot in the world.
And what a great place to stand up paddle. I have been lucky enough to be on this type of river trip. To me, that's ideal luxury, to be outside all the time. But like you said, you can take a break. You can bring family members who perhaps want to take it easier, even if you want to be on your stand up all the time. And then amazing meals, sandy beaches, beautiful camping. It's such a pleasure to do a trip like that. And I'm so happy to see, because when I did it, it was, you know, you could get in a kayak, maybe they'd bring a couple of those along. It was mainly a rafting trip. You're mainly with the group. But how cool, and what a great idea what you're doing. Is Brittany your co-guide, or maybe she was a couple of years ago? I know she.
No, On this trip, it's actually through California Water Sport
Oh,
Collective. So
neat.
that's the crew that I partner with for teaching
Uh-huh.
on the American River. Melissa Demarie, she's their chief instigator, right? The gal that runs the outfitter. So she's going to be in a kayak guiding the pack rafters and kayakers, and then I'll be on the SUP guiding the suppers.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Variety and something for everyone. Well, that sounds fantastic. So June in Slovenia, and when is the Salmon River?
That's in August. So August 20 through 25.
Yeah. So a reminder that because you have a website, right, as well as your social media. Cool sticker. The riversupguy.com. It's behind like writing. There it is. Yeah. So you can find Dave and all that he does. I know I was scheduled to actually paddle with you, and there was a forest fire or something. But I still want to do that. And again, my friend Terry, I was just talking to her, like we have to make that happen up in Tahoe. It looks like, as you know, I stand up paddle race too, but we like to fit those fun things in. You know, the races are on the weekend during the week when you're on a road trip. So hoping to make that happen this summer in between your being gone on your adventures. I would love to join you on your rivers. So what have you not done? I mean, you have so much locally. Is there a place you want to go, or a type of paddling, or anything that's kind of on your personal bucket list?
Oh boy, we actually are going, if all goes well, to a new river this summer. So after Slovenia, we're hoping to. This is going to be our third time trying to set up this trip in Montenegro. It's going to be on the Tara River, which is the Grand Canyon of Europe. So that will be a new river that I'll hopefully have an opportunity to check out. Japan has been really high on my list.
Wow.
There's a really big community of whitewater stand-up paddleboarders that are really good and really committed to building community. So they've done an amazing job of growing the sport there, and so that's pretty high up on my list as well as places to check out. And since I last talked to you, I connected with somebody in Peru actually that is interested in maybe starting something there. So I'm psyched to maybe the opportunity later this year to get down to Peru and check out some of their rivers.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, two more great places. I hope you get to both of them. Those are fantastic. So stand-up paddling, you've done so many different sort of extreme sports and extreme skills in the military and everything. But it sounds like you know, when you started, just it was other things. I mean, we talked a little bit last time about how being outside in general, but somehow on the water, what it does for your mental health, you know, what it does
Yes,
for your spirit.
absolutely. I mean, there's something about the river that I find magical, and it's one of the reasons why I have put a lot of my other sports that used to be my passion on hold, just so I spend literally every free moment that I have on the river. It's how dynamic the environment is, right? The river doesn't stop. So if you're on moving water, right, you have to figure out a way to slow yourself down or find a place where you can take a break, but sometimes it's not easy, right? So you're in the current, you're committed to the line that you're running on a rapid, and you have to make decisions, and you don't have a lot of time to think. You have to kind of react, right? And so there's
Yeah.
something about that feeling of you get to a proficiency level that is good enough where you can just react, right? And sometimes your choices are not the best and you end up swimming, right? And sometimes you nail it and you nail the line and you clean the rapid, right? So that dynamic environment, and because I don't have a river background, learning about hydrology has been really, really challenging and exciting for me. And every time that I step up into a higher difficulty of river, I realize that there's so much more to learn about hydrology, because now I'm in an environment where things are happening that I haven't experienced before, because it's a more complex river environment. So learning how to successfully move on that environment while standing on the board is probably one of the greatest challenges that I've had in terms of sports, right? And it challenges the body, the mind, the spirit, and makes me feel really good. And you know, balance with that, I would say that, you know, I actually divide my time on the river between improving my skills, but I also spend a lot of time both on and off the river trying to grow our community. That's been one of my big goals as of late, is growing the sport, right? Through education, providing webinars, getting people psyched, taking people on trips, supporting our local, you know, River SUP club kind of meetup group that we have, right? So those are a lot of the things that I spend a lot of time and energy on, because I just want to share, you know, this sport with others. You know, I remember when Jeannie and I took our first lesson, right? We went to Colorado because there was nobody in the area that was teaching classes on the river. Colorado was like the closest place, and we traveled there for a class, and just I remember how excited we were during that class and after that class. And I just want to recreate that experience for others. You know, a lot of folks, I think, see us on the river and they just think that we're a bunch of nutcases, you know, doing something that's really dangerous. And they don't realize how accessible the sport is, right? If you have decent balance and you don't mind being in the water and you have a spirit of adventure, I think, you know, you can get down just about any entry level river and have a great time doing it. I've had, you know, younger teenagers. I've had folks in their 70s taking my River SUP classes. So it's a sport that it's really for everyone, right? And I encourage people to try it, right?
Yeah. Well, I foresee that it's going to be huge. What you're doing in your community really is going to grow, because we had this surge of people getting to the water for the first time, like you did in Tahoe, who have gotten hooked. But maybe don't have a lot of equipment. But as they do more, they'll want to try different things and new things. And I bet they'll be coming in your direction. So thank you for what you do and the outreach that you do. You are a professor, instructor by trade. So it's great that you balance that, having so much experience and learning it and improving yourself on the water. But also, I know you took, I believe, ACA training. You have so much training already, and in the whole safety area and everything. Are you some kind of a water rescue class or something too?
Yeah, so I'm certified as a River SUP instructor through the ACA, and I've taken classes through Sierra Rescue, which is our local swiftwater rescue provider. And I also teach some SUP-specific river rescue classes on the American River. Things that, you know, specific to stand-up paddleboarders and how we can help each other out in the event of an unfortunate or unforeseen event on the river.
Yeah, which is always so important. As much as we talk about our love for the water and the river and water, you know, Mother Nature is to be respected on all levels, often on and off the water. And sometimes when we have a big surge like this, as we have had, and people finding the outdoors for the first time and getting excited, you know, during the pandemic, they sold out of bikes and kayaks and stand-up paddleboards and camping equipment, because people were really realizing, wow, I really do like being outside, which is healthy in general, but the whole safety aspect to it, and maybe a little environment and learning to love and respect Mother Nature. I think it helps so much when you are giving that to your students and your community that you're teaching. So thanks for sharing those things.
You bet.
Good stuff. So any other tips about Whitewater? You've given us a lot of great ones. Rivers are it just is so interesting to people, again, who come from coastal or maybe more urban access. Like I don't tend to wear footwear because I live in a place that doesn't get cold enough to, and we either walk in on a sandy beach or off of a dock. But I mean, there's things I hadn't thought about. Like if you go in a glass at a boat ramp, you might step on broken glass. I mean, and you're going in on rocks and you're stepping on rocks. So something like that is another piece of like river equipment.
Yeah, I would say my big advice, and I think we mentioned this last time, is get educated, right? And there's lots of ways that you can do that. You could find someone like myself in your area that teaches classes. I say that's a great way to do it. You might get involved with a local club or meetup group that has folks that are experienced on the river. So take your first strokes on the river with somebody that has experience, right? So they can show you the right way to do it, right? Unfortunately, there's wrong way to do it that could lead you into trouble, right? And so, we mentioned equipment. That's an important one, making sure that we have the right equipment for the river. Understanding that river conditions can change really quickly. We talked about rivers with dam releases. Within a matter of like an hour, you could go from really low water conditions to really high water conditions, right? So having an understanding of how conditions can change quickly on a river is important, right? And then technique, right? Having the ability to move successfully on a river, understanding the hazards that are there and how to negotiate safely. It's much easier going out with someone that has experience. So that would be my biggest advice for the day is get educated.
Yeah. You talked about smaller and usually inflatable boards. I know you work with Hala, which is a great company. I know my leash is from Hala. I got it from Peter at a trade show. But I had never, got a Hala sticker. Yeah. I had never heard of a retractable fin, and that makes so much sense on the river. You've got that right there too. So that's a fin box. And there it goes. So if something is impeding it, moving it aside. Yeah.
Yeah, so Hala designed this first generation of this. I think it was maybe in 2016, somewhere around there. And the second generation just came out last year. The idea is if you're paddling in shallow water rivers, we either have to run no fins or really small fins. But Hala has designed a retractable fin that now provides you, similar traction on your board as you would with a regular flat water board. But if you do happen to be in a shallow water situation where your fin hits a rock, the fin retracts back into housing without adding a lot of resistance, so decreasing the likelihood that you're going to fall off the board or damage your fin or your fin box on your board.
There you go. Well, brilliant. I love that innovations are still happening, and I think they will continue to, because that looked like kind of a big fin for the river, but when you showed that it pushed back, it's like, oh, amazing, out of the way. But still, you should go out and try it because it isn't easy, but finless paddling is a good way to prepare for the river. You're going to find yourself spinning in circles, but it really makes you think about how to use your paddle to direct the direction that you're going, which, again, we do some on a long skinny board, but not nearly as much as you need to on the river.
You got it.
Well, thank you for sharing your passion for stand-up river and your knowledge. And stand-up river whitewater paddling is amazing stuff. I hope everybody who is interested in stand-up in any means will get a chance to do this someplace in the world. Going on a trip with you is a great way. So the River SUP Guy website, find them on Facebook. You're probably on I know you're on Instagram. We're on Instagram right now. Silly meat. Yep. But thank you, and thanks to SUP Connect for letting me do these interviews. I always learn something new, learned a lot from you about whitewater. And it looks like we didn't have any technical difficulties. Thank you.
And thanks for having me again.
So it goes right on to IGTV, and then we'll get it on our YouTube channels, SUP Connect, and I put it on mine, KT Outside. You're welcome to have it too if you have any use for it. Great to talk with you. Best of luck. Enjoy the rest of the season. I'm glad you're still getting out.
I'll see you on the river.
Dave. See you on the water. Bye.